Hello, fight fans, and welcome to episode 4 of Before the Baldman Speaks. I'm your host, as always, Andrew Lawrence. And America, I don't know what happened. I'm not. You forgot who is the man. The man is Jesus. Jesus, not gay Jesus. Not gay Jesus. This is Andrew Lawrence coming to you live before the Baldman Speaks, directly after UFC Fight Night 70 from Hollywood, Florida, featuring the main event between Lyoto Machida and the Soldier of God, Yoel Romero. A very interesting end to tonight's fights, with the Soldier of God speaking out against the recent decision by the Supreme Court of the United States of America legalizing gay marriage across all 50 states. They rattled the old Soldier of God there for a bit. You could when you're the Soldier of God, you see, you have to speak out sometimes. God demands it, and the Soldier of God was called upon by the Lord, our Savior and sanctioner of all great combat sports, to let everyone in Florida know that they forgot who is the man. The real man is Jesus, and not gay Jesus. It's very funny reaction by our man John Anik to kind of move right along from the anti-gay speech we were about to get in broken English, and get him going right to the finish, and kind of what a finish it was from Yoel Romero. I scored this fight, both the 2 rounds until he got the finish. I scored them both for Yoel Romero. I felt like he landed the more effective shots. Lyoto Machida was definitely in there with leg kicks and getting damage, but Yoel Romero cruising all day with his counters, and in his counter lefts landed with big power by the 2nd round, and by the 3rd round he firmly had it in control, closing the fight off with a nice little knee tap, and got on top of him, landed big elbows, and that was that. So beware if you're a young gay kid in Florida, in the Coconut Creek area, because Yoel Romero is out to get you. In other fight news, Lorenz Larkin got his KO in his 170-pound debut with a terrible set of hair. He did not have anything to say about gay Jesus at the end of his fight. He had plenty to say about the beaches in Florida, which apparently are quite nice. I'm not sure if anyone out there in the internet's aware, but Florida, nice beaches. So we had some real good promotional work today in the main event and in the co-main event. Beyond that, we had some goddamn stinkers and some fights. The 4 preliminary bouts that were on Fox Sports 2, which I promise you is actually a television station, a channel on your television. Maybe not on your television, but on some people's televisions, Fox Sports 2 actually exists. And there were fighters. You could have easily just not gone and seen that. Tony Sims had a KO, and that was about all that was worthwhile to see in the preliminaries. Other main card fights, let's go over the notes. Like I said, Lorenz Larkin with a giant KO. Antonio Carlos Jr. getting a little hype train going with him, defeating Eddie Gordon. In a case where really Eddie Gordon was outclassed, and we're probably seeing that Eddie Gordon's just not made for the UFC. Pretty lackluster affair there. Steve Boss showing that his stand-up's not good enough to crack it against Thiago Santos, with just an unbelievable highlight reel head kick KO. An unstoppable early fight in the card. And then what kicked off the main card, the FS1 portion, was a pretty lackluster affair between Levan Makashvili and Hacker Diaz. A split decision victory for Diaz, where his stock really takes a bit of a hit. I think for Makashvili, second fight in about 40 days. But the first 2 of his fights ever in the UFC, it was a really good look for him, and he comes out on top looking very nice. That's that for the brief overview. We have 2 guests on tonight, 2 very interesting fellows. The first guest we have is Gopalo MMA on Twitter. He is Paulo is a writer for the Vendetta Fighter, and today's knockout, a Toronto-based journalist, and he'll be calling in any moment now. And our second guest of the night will be the MMA genius. We are all going to be blessed by the genius, and he will lay on us some genius things. So any minute now, we'll get a call in from Gopalo. A lot to really digest, mostly in the main event of this fight, because we have Lyoto Machida at an interesting phase in his career. He just took 2 big losses, and this one seemed like he was rushing them back to back. A brutal knockout at the hands of Jesus Christ, Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy wished he'd knocked out Lyoto Machida. Luke Rockhold in New Jersey with a vicious elbow that dropped him and then finishes him with some delightful ground skills. And this time, Yoel Romero just dominating on the ground with some heavy elbows. So we're messaging in Gopalo, and he'll be calling us in any second. So right here, we got him on the line. Speaking of the man himself, you can catch him on Twitter at any time at Gopalo MMA. He's a writer for Vendetta Fighter. Paulo, how you doing, brother?
How you doing, Andrew? Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure for me as well. So let's start it off with the main event. We had Lyoto Machida, kind of looking slower than he had normally, and a fantastic performance from Yoel Romero. How do you view this main event? Do you see it as a former legend of the sport deteriorating, or do you see this as the ascension of Yoel Romero, who's undefeated in the UFC?
A little bit of both. I've actually seen Machida sort of slow down a little bit ever since he lost to John Jones. He won a couple of fights after that. I mean, he beat Munoz, he beat Musasi. I think he dusted CB Dollaway in really vicious fashion, but every time he's taken a step up competition, he's lost decisively. And they're not like losses. He lost to them decisively. He lost to Weidman. I mean, he won I think 1 round against Weidman, but he lost all 4 pretty decisively. Then he lost to Rockhold, as we all know. And looking at this, Romero's a beast, man. Romero's a physical specimen. And I thought if Machida doesn't put him away fast, he's going to be in trouble. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Romero took advantage. He cornered Machida, put him away when he got him on the ground.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I heard a lot of people on Twitter talk the opposite of your opinion in saying that as the rounds progressed, it was going to be more of a Machida game. And I couldn't disagree more. I just thought it's just a longer span of time for Yoel to land one of those power shots, and we know that Lyoto's gotten more and more chinny, kind of. I really don't view it after the John Jones fight so much as after that war with Chris Weidman. The Chris Weidman-Lyoto Machida fight is one of my favorite fights maybe ever in the 185-pound division. It was a blood and guts fight, but you are right. I only scored one of those rounds for Machida, but it seemed, like it was like there was heart, and you never really had to see Machida go after an opponent. He's, clearly a counterpuncher. But despite those facts, after all the damage, we've just seen a clear deterioration from Lyoto. So where do you... Okay, put yourself in the manager's shoes. What do you do, and what do you say to Lyoto Machida?
Well, first of all, if I was like... Sean Shelby or Joe Silva, I'd be like, well, Lyoto Machida's pretty much worn himself out of the title pictures, that's for sure. I mean, 2 straight finishes, that's pretty hard to think Lyoto Machida's like one of those prime contenders at this point. So I'd probably be like, maybe take some time off, get his stuff together, and give him some fun fights, some novelty fights. I mean, he's still a pretty big name in the sport. Maybe give him Vitor Belfort next or something like that, like a big name fight for sure.
So there's no thought process for you that Lyoto should hang it up and can't take the damage anymore?
Oh yeah, there's that for sure. But I mean, Yoel Romero and Luke Rockhold. I mean, I could see Luke Rockhold's fighting for the belt next, and Yoel Romero he could foreseeably be fighting for the belt in the future. I mean, losing to 2 title contenders in that fashion, I mean, it's hard to say that he should be hanging them up. I mean, I guess he has been brutalized really badly, and you could say, like, for his safety and stuff like that, he should maybe like take it easy a little bit. But it's really up to him. It's his decision. And I still think that Lyoto Machida still wants to fight. He probably still thinks of himself as a contender. So maybe give him someone a little bit lower ranked. I mean, I said I wanted to see him fight Vitor Belfort. That's a novelty fight. But I could also see the winner or the loser of Stylish Ladies and Michael Bisping fighting Lyoto Machida.
I really like the fight with Vitor Belfort if Belfort wants any more fights, or if even Lyoto wants any more fights. My concern with Lyoto Machida still fighting is he's always been a speed-based fighter. It's always been a timing thing, and it's always been hand speed. Those are his game. Those are the elements that make him, successful at an elite level in his game. And really, those are starting to go. And when they go, they seem to drop off a lot. Now, a fight against Belfort, I feel like that's a fight I could get behind, just because we clearly saw the physical drop off of Vitor Belfort in his last fight. So that's a really good. Brazilian main event or co-main event in a big Brazilian card if there's a title retention by Aldo and he fights another one down in Rio, or a main event of some fight night card that they could make good money on. Rio needs a premier card, and Brazil seemed like it's thirsty for a really big event down there. Very interesting that this card had a lot of Brazilians in showcase spots that really didn't live up to that showcase potential. They might have got the W, but not necessarily in the way that they should have got the win. And Brazil was represented really well in the stands. I want to jump down the card a little bit and talk a little bit about Thiago Matea Santos's KO against Steve Boss. Something maybe close to your Canadian heart if you're a Steve Boss guy. Does that peg you right?
Yeah, I mean, before this fight happened, before I did my preliminary research, I was thinking I should maybe bet Bossy in this fight. I wasn't really that high on Santos. Santos, he's the better fighter overall, but he gets tentative, And I'm like, Bossy, this guy's a scrapper. He's a fighter. He's not a martial artist. He's a fighter. That's the kind of fighter that he is. And I thought, he'd go in there, he'd give Santos a hard time, and he'd pound him out. But I totally did not see that coming, like that Santos would dust him that fast. I mean, I picked Santos to win by decision, but that was a vicious head kick. That was one of the more vicious head kicks I've seen in a while. I mean, Bossy froze up there like Terry Edom was froze up after Barboza wheel kicked him. That was vicious. That was violent.
It was an uncomfortable level of stiffness that his body made. And I'm not a huge fan of these memes, and someone put one of him holding a trumpet because he kind of had the look of a jazz musician there for a second. But even that made me cringe.
Yeah, no, that's pretty wrong, but it's funny. I'm not going to lie. I laughed at that, but that's too soon, maybe. Too soon.
It's one of those things where I laughed and felt bad about myself for laughing. It's, the depravity of the typical MMA fan, I guess. But Thiago Santos, what do you see from him? Do you view this as a novelty KO? It kind of had that feel of someone who's a mixed martial artist against a scrapper, like you said, just kind of out techniquing him or finding an easy hole in someone's armor. Do you view him as legit? Do you think he has a big future ahead of him? Where are you at on Santos?
It's a little bit hard to gauge right now because he knocked out. I mean, granted, it was a really nice highlight reel knockout, but this was his UFC debut, and he hasn't really fought that much in the past few years. So it's not like he was this really highly touted prospect. And let's not forget, Thiago Santos lost to Uriah Hall not too recently, and Uriah Hall just lost to Rafael Natal, and Rafael Natal's not even a ranked fighter. So if I was matchmaking, I suggested maybe Rafael Natal and Thiago Santos could fight each other and see go. But I still think Thiago Santos is still in the outside of the top 15. But he's definitely a novelty fighter at this point. He's a showcase fighter, and finishing people in the first round. That's a good thing, you know.
That's fun, you know. They want action fighters, and that's an action fighter. Rapid fire. Do you give Yurdro Silva? Do you give Steve Bosse another fight?
I'll give Steve Bosse another fight. Because granted, he took a fight. He came to the UFC's call when Rampage dropped out of the Maldonado fight, so he definitely gets that. That's definitely a plus point. He got knocked out pretty soon. I mean, it's a flash knockout. You never really saw what he's capable of. So granted, maybe give him a much lower fight, maybe a fight pass kind of fight with like another newcomer or another guy coming off a loss. But yeah, maybe why not give him another fight? Maybe maybe in the Saskatoon fight or maybe another Canadian fight down the road. I mean, he is a former hockey player, so.
Oh yeah. I'm aware. There's Robin Black, and people who don't know Robin Black, if they're American based, maybe. Yeah, of course you do. Most Canucks would. Robin Black does fantastic breakdowns for the Fight Network, and he had a very funny breakdown as he sometimes does of these fighters for Steve Bosse. I like the original idea of or the original fight that we had for Steve Bosse, even after the loss, and giving him Fabio Maldonado. I don't think that there's a danger there of Fabio going wrestling on us or shooting too many head kicks. So two scrappy guys. We thought both had chins. Maybe Bosse's chin is questionable. Maybe after all the beatings, Fabio's chin's getting questionable as well. A lot of disappointing fights on the undercard, so I don't want to get into them too much. But I did want to touch on it. We skipped over it. Was Lorenz Larkin's KO against
Ibio.
Santiago Possovibio, as Anik threw out there today. A pretty good performance of him, Strikeforce guy, kind of finding his footing in the UFC, has some wins over some big names, but still kind of floats around in no man's land of the UFC. Where's the ceiling for him? What's next for him? And how impressive is this takeaway? He was a very big favorite to finish this fight.
Yeah, I was actually tweeting sort of half seriously that after Lorenz Larkin dusts Ponzinibbio, which he did quite impressively, that he should call out the champion, Robbie Lawler, simply because he has a win over him. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It's not a fluke win. He beat him decisively, 30-27, I think it was, in Strikeforce. And that's a good style matchup. If Robbie Lawler loses, let's say, to Rory Mack, that could be a fight. I could see that as a fight. I mean, a lot of people would say, "Oh, he's a nobody. He's 2-5 in his 2-3 in his last fights. He probably needs to beat a top 15 guy, a top 10 guy first." But stylistically, I think it's a really good match. As far as his ceiling, I think he could be a top 15 fighter, maybe even top 10. I'm not so sure. But I was running down the list of the top 15 fighters. I could see him beating half of those guys. So he's really got good takedown defense. He's got fast hands. He's very athletic. The problem with him in the past hasn't been his physical problems. It's always been mental. Like sometimes he just doesn't show up in his fights. Like against Brad Tavares, he looked really flat in that fight. Didn't have the explosiveness. He kept backing himself up against the cage against Costas Philippou. But if he shows up in his prime form, in his killer form, like he did now and against John Howard, he could be a top 15 fighter, maybe even top 10. And who knows, maybe he might get a title shot if Robbie Lawler stays the champion.
If he plays his cards right, I agree with you. There's spots in the upper, range of the rankings that if you play your cards right and get the right matchups, if you have a good manager who can squeeze you into the right spots and say no when the UFC comes knocking on the stylistic matchups that don't favor you, Lorenz Larkin could find himself, in contention. I'm not sure if he'll ever quite get that shot, but he could be in the discussion and bring his stock up a little bit higher than it currently is. You mentioned Robbie Lawler instantly, or earlier rather, in his loss against Larkin. It almost seems like everyone in the UFC's forgotten about Strikeforce Robbie Lawler and kind of how that all went down.
Yeah. Robbie Lawler was a middleweight, actually, in Strikeforce, a middling middleweight, actually. I think he was like a 500 fighter. But
middling is the key there. Middling.
A middling middleweight, a middling weight. But he didn't lose to chumps. I mean, he lost to Larkin, who, as we know right now, is a really good fighter. He lost to Jake Shields, who also beat Dan Henderson. and I mean, laugh at Jake Shields' style all you want. He's a pretty good fighter. And I think he lost to Jacare, and Jacare, as we know, is a title contender. So it's not like Lawler was a scrub in Strikeforce. He was just given tough matchups. So, and it's good that he moved back to welterweight because I think welterweight's a better division for him.
Yeah, I think that's the case. But I think it was more of an attitude problem, kind of with Robbie too in Strikeforce. He seemed to have the full-on BJ Penn, I don't give a fuck going on nearly every fight he came in.
Yeah, you could attribute that to that too, and maybe underestimating Larkin a little bit because Larkin was coming up at that point. So
it was not a name, was just no one. Yes. But Lorenz Larkin, a definite force in 170, and in a storyline to watch. Like I said, pretty much one of the more dismal preliminary cards that we've seen in a while, and probably a symptom of this card having visa problems, and a lot of the fighters training to come in from Brazil couldn't get U.S. visas, I believe, is the story. So we had four fights and 8 fighters on the preliminary card on 1 week's notice. A sign of why the UFC should never do this again, maybe?
Oh, yeah, no, I think the UFC might not want to have a fight in the U.S. for a lot of Brazilian fighters in the future, because that was weird. Like, usually when they have Ultimate Fighter Brazil finales, I think this was the first time they had it outside Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. Every time it's in Brazil, so they never had those issues.
Well, they didn't even bring on fighters from the show because most of them couldn't get work visas. So these are just people they could scrounge up on a week's notice. Tony Sims picked up a nice little KO victory in the preliminaries. I mentioned it earlier against this guy Montgomery, who had one of the most southern mullets in the history of southern mullets. This is a dude who would be at a Leonard Skinner concert right now. If he didn't have a fight tonight, he was at whatever Leonard Skinner concert is going on in front of whatever southern state capital, about keeping the Confederate flag flying above. But just a really great KO victory for him, and kind of the only highlight there. Last thing that we'll mention 2 more fights really briefly. Hakra Diaz, takes down a split decision victory in a lackluster fight against a second, kind of a sophomore fighter, Levan Makashvili. A bad look for Diaz. Does his stock drop a lot for you?
Not really, because if you look at a lot of Hakra and Diaz's fights in the UFC, none of them have really stood out. Yeah. I mean, he fought Ricardo Lamas because Ricardo Lamas is the top 5 fighter, but that really didn't blow anyone else tuned out of that fight, because people even thought that Ricardo Lamas was like over the hill after seeing that fight, because they're like, oh, nothing's going on in this fight. They're pushing each other against the cage. They're exchanging positions. Like, nothing's going on. And then his fight against Nick Lentz, who's another grinder. Like, I don't even remember any moments in that fight. It's just the way he fights. He just has. I really don't want to say he's not an exciting fighter, but I can't lie either. He's just not the type of fighter that'll blow people out of the water.
I do want to say it. I want to say that Hakra Diaz is not an exciting fighter. He is a bad fighter. Well, he's not a bad fighter. He's technically a good fighter. But, Luke Thomas has made this point a bunch of times. Just because someone is technically good doesn't mean that they're entertaining to watch. And Hakra Diaz falls into that case and will fall into that case. I think eventually he meets someone who figures him out. I thought Makashvili, I scored the fight for him, but I also had a bet on him, so I was a little biased. Funny how that works when you have a bet on a fighter. But there was some debate on Twitter. Not so many journalists actually scored it from Makashvili, but ultimately not a good look for him again in a spot where he could have gained some fans. I have no clue why you're putting Hakra Diaz on Fox Sports 1 ever. That's wrong. He belongs on a network being watched at the rate of Fox Sports 2, and that is the final case. The last thing I want to talk to you about, and then I'll let you mention something, is the Brazilian cowboy, Alex Oliveira. He shows up and gets a pretty lackluster decision against, who was it, Joe Merritt.
Joey Slash.
Joey Slash. Model Slash, yeah, right. You might want to have to lose that fighter part of the Slash soon. a minus 450 favorite going in there, not looking like a minus 450 favorite.
Oh no, for sure. There were definitely parts of those fight that I think people who put a lot of juice on Oliveira were sweating so badly because I thought he won that fight pretty handily. But knowing MMA judges and how bad they can be, Joey Slash did a couple of things. I mean, I think he slammed Oliveira at one point. He took top position over him and landed some ground and pound punches towards the end of the round. He landed a big knee around the third. And I'm thinking, yo, if you're an MMA judge and you really want the American fighter to win, you have a little bit of material to justify a robbery decision there. So Oliveira got Joey Slash in a couple of precarious positions. He got him in a choke. He took his back several times. He just couldn't pull the trigger, just couldn't finish him. It's hard to take away whether Oliveira was just not as strong or he was a little bit more spent, or if Joey Slash is just this really strong or really tough fighter that you can't put away. It's really hard to get a gauge of it, but I had like a little lottery parlay with Oliveira finishing in the distance, and I got 5 out of 6 of those right, and it was Oliveira who didn't get it. So I'm like a little bit cheesed about that, but you know,
he screwed you over, man. The Cowboy.
Yeah,
you know, I think as far as Cowboy goes for me, the Brazilian version of Cowboy, I think he has the symptom of what Cowboy had by the end of when he fought Ben Henderson, and that he's just a little bit worn out. Just didn't have the juice all the way there. He's been fighting quite a bit recently. Not as serious a schedule as the one true Cowboy, but he's been pretty active. He needs to go back to the gym, retool up. You know, take the momentum from this victory. Take 6 months, sharpen the tools, and go back at it. So that was really it on my list. Does anything else from the card really stick out to you, man?
No, that's pretty much it. There's only one thing I want to touch upon was Eddie Gordon and Caro de Zapato. I know
I don't want to talk about that. Yeah.
No, I know. It's just that both those guys hold like a spot in my heart because like they're both really nice guys, decent guys, Ultimate Fighter winners. And at one point, I thought both of them had a really good future in the UFC. I mean, trucked Diego Lima, but looking at everyone's trucked Diego Lima.
Diego Lima is not UFC caliber and cannot be held up to, if it's like you beat Diego Sanchez, that should be like, okay, you're allowed to be considered in the UFC now. It's the Lima brothers have fallen to pieces. They just took too much damage, so that's off the table. That's off the table.
Well, I mean, when a Chinese grappler knocks you out in the first round, you know, it's not a good sign. For sure.
It's really not. Yeah, but Eddie Truck Gordon, I think that it's the end of the road for him as far as the UFC is concerned. And I just want to
say, he is not the worst Ultimate Fighter winner. I'm seeing this on Twitter a lot. People are saying he's the worst Ultimate Fighter winner. I need to remind you guys, there was Jonathan Brookins and Colton Smith. And no offense to those guys, but I would pick Eddie Gordon over the two of them. Okay.
Colton Smith is to me the worst tough winner in the history of the sport. You know, he strategized his way very nicely through that show, and just his caliber of talent is just not what the UFC caliber should be, and is a complete indictment of the level of fighter that's now participating in that show. All right, man, I'll let you go on that. Poor old Eddie Truck Gordon, and you know, I'll leave it up to you to say goodbye to everyone out there in the Twitterverse or out in the internet land, and you know, plug what you got going on.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone who follows me on Twitter. All the people have been good to me and giving me advice, especially in the betting end. Best fight picks, obviously Daniel Levy, Nick UFC, catch his show, catch him at MMA Junior, MMA Genius, who will be on the show a little bit later on, if I'm not mistaken. And James Lynch, Carlin Barsley, and everyone else talking about good MMA, and everyone else on Twitter. I know I'm not catching everyone right now, but you know, it's a little bit hard. I'll give you guys a shout out later. And thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate this, man. It's a fun show.
Nah, man. Yeah, we try to keep it light and fun. And thanks for taking the time, and thanks for coming on. Check out your stuff on Vendetta Fighter too.
And today's knockout.
Yeah, today's knockout. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for coming on the show, man. Great stuff, and we'll have you on again soon.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Take it easy,
Thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
I know. My pleasure, brother. Take it easy. So, all right, that was Gopalo MMA from Twitter. Go give him a follow if you don't already. Very good guy, really good insight. Our next guest calling in any minute now will be the MMA genius. Some really good thoughts, I think, to circle back at the beginning of our conversation about Lyoto Machida and kind of where he goes from here. A matchup with the young dinosaur seems to be the best thing that I've heard. In just my brief checking out on Twitter that anyone's really suggested. It's two really good Brazilian fighters, or were two really good Brazilian fighters, who are now, a little bit aged. And I'm a big fan in general of just the idea of doing the senior circuit. I really think that the UFC right now can't afford to let go of these aging stars because they will go to Bellator on free TV and get massive ratings with people like Tito Ortiz. So you can't give up a Lyoto Machida. He gets to dictate as long as his career wants to go now. I mean, we just saw Josh Koscheck this week signed to the Bellator cage, and I would have bet dollars to donuts that Josh Koscheck was done fighting. I just think that there isn't really many people in the UFC who can't beat him, or anyone that would get matched up with him, because you just can't match him up with these people, the young prospects on the undercard and on the Fight Pass. It's just anyone who has a big enough name wouldn't be able to be allowed to fight a Josh Koscheck. But circling around to Lyoto, so he has the power in the negotiating system with the UFC to kind of stay as long as he really wants. So it's really up to him and his people to tell him to back out of these fights, or to back away from fighting in general, and that's when he'll stop. We're waiting on a call in from the MMA genius any minute now, and he should be joining us. Some really, really interesting tidbits about this fight that really didn't have much to do about the card itself. The last card, this is the last card of the UFC that we'll ever see our regular trunks on people. After this fight, we'll now start going to the Reebok deal. So we wave goodbye to the many good brands that we knew as MMA fighting brands that we probably, if you were me, never bought any T-shirts of. No more eyes from Bad Boy or Dynamic Fastener to keep us entertained. Although Dynamic Fastener is very new in relative terms to the MMA apparel game, a real solid contributor late. I did a little bit of research a bit ago on what Dynamic Fastener does, and apparently they make industrial fasteners with really zero commercial application for you and I. So they were just kind of in the game to be in the game, and giving out money to fighters for the sake of doing it. Okay, so we have our next guest on the phone. You can find him on Twitter at MMAGenius05. That's at MMAGenius05. You and I can only refer to him as the MMA Genius. MMA Genius, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, brother.
So lighting right now.
What was that?
I'm trying to find some better lighting right now.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll let you find some better lighting, and I'll pop open your microphone a bit too. Overall, the the main event was kind of the end of the Machida era, so to speak. Yoel Romero, the soldier of God, the hater of gays, really laying it on in the third round as soon as it got to the ground, and poor Lyoto falling to pieces. What do you think happens first for Lyoto Machida? Where does he go from here?
Well, the fight went out exactly how I predicted it. Third round TKO. And as for Lyoto, I don't think he's done by any means. I think there's a lot of fun fights still left around for him. I mean, he still has a trilogy to complete with Shogun. He can go up to 205, 185, Vitor. Um,
Now that's interesting. You mentioned the Shogun fight, and that was a fight that wasn't on my horizon at all. But I think that's a fight that kind of makes sense. Now, in a lot of people's minds, Shogun won both of those fights, and he kind of won the more important one with a big stoppage.
yeah.
But at this point in the game, who do you give an edge to in that fight, Lyoto or Shogun?
Well, Shogun's training at King's MMA now, back with his old coach, Elias Theodorou. They've both taken a lot of punishment lately. Um, Man, I would still give a slight edge to Lyoto, but Shogun's ability to take damage is decreasing rapidly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that as much as Shogun, had looked dominant in those two performances, his deterioration has been much greater and much more extreme than Lyoto's. Lyoto's head movement slowed down and isn't there as much, and his hand speed slower. But Shogun's ability to take a punch is no longer existent. I have serious worries that he'll even be able to finish and win the Nogueira fight, and that's really a fight that his career is on the line for.
Yeah. The thing with Lyoto, man, when you think he's down, he always comes back and and surprises you. I think his next fight, he's gonna most likely be very desperate, and we might end up seeing the best performance out of him. I think he needs to take some time off, maybe take a year off from the game right now, recover from these severe beatings he's taking, and come back stronger. But I definitely don't think his career is over by any means.
Yeah, I hesitate to tell. I was saying earlier how the modern MMA landscape with Bellator in play taking veteran fighters, it's really on the fighter to determine when they want to leave. There's no more Dana White pushing fighters out when they really are done, and like the shame of the regional scene. There's places to make money. Well, there's actually a place for superstars with the name like Lyoto Machida to go and make money. So if he wants fights, he can have fights. Are you a fan of this idea? This idea that I pitched earlier of kind of like the senior PGA version of the UFC. The old timers getting at each other and fighting.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, why not just have all the washed up fighters fight in their own weight class? Vitor, Lyoto. I feel like those guys' careers aren't done, but they're definitely past their prime. But if they fight each other, they could have fun, entertaining fights. But as far as fighting these top level competition like Yoel, Romero, Chris Weidman, Jacare, it's over, and it's no other. It's plain and simple. They just cannot compete at that level anymore.
Yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see if the matchmaking from Joe Silva kind of goes into that direction, stays in that direction. There's a long kind of history in both wrestling, the professional wrestling, and in fighting of young fighters kind of making names off of aged fighters. And where I can respect that to a certain degree, I think after a couple of those, losses, Luke Rockhold and Yoel Romero, you just made stars out of them. Bump them off into some payday fights. Put them on a Rio card, on a fight night card, let everyone make some money. Let the Brazilian fans go nuts. It's a good quality fight, and you could do it with Shogun if he wins against Nogueira, or you can do it against. You could do it against Nogueira. I'm not sure if they'd take that matchup, but a fight against Nogueira, too, I think would be very interesting.
Imagine Shogun versus Machida 3 on a UFC fight night in Brazil. That would sell out like that,
They could put that in a very big place in Rio. Those are two huge names, especially in Brazil. When they're dying for cards, they've been having really second-tier cards all of this year, with the exception of the Ronda fight that'll happen later. But so far this year, they're really at second-tier fights. Who else stuck out from you? If you have to say anyone beyond the main event, what was the either performance or fight that stuck out to you?
Performance of the night. I'm going to have to give that to my man, Lorenz Larkin, man. I know it got a little hairy at times, a little wild, but, I mean, him at 170 is going to be a real problem. The leg kicks that he implemented on Ponzinibbio tonight was just slowly, systematically breaking him down and getting him, easier and easier to quit. Um, when he got into wild exchanges, he landed the cleaner shots and he moved his head out of time in time to get out of Ponzinibbio's shots.
Yeah, Larkin kind of has that style where he's not scared to attempt to roll a punch, which can be a very, very dangerous thought in MMA. But he seems successful at it, and on a fight night where a lot of people had showcase fights that they should have gone in there, did the thing, looked great, looked like a world beater. He was one of the few fighters who actually stepped up to the plate and made his finish and made his bones happen from it. Some people got finishes in fights that were kind of, a little bit more competitive. I don't think that many people gave Ponzinibbio a shot in this fight. But earlier this week I was talking about how Lorenz Larkin doesn't get a finish in this fight. I just, he has finishes on his record, but there's always been something about him that I kind of thought his UFC performances seemed like a little lackluster. Seemed like, he didn't have, his full, being in the fight. He just didn't seem like he wanted to get in there and finish. But this was a complete 180 from that. He sensed, he slowly kind of picked away and then got his finish there. Real quick, the head kick knockout of the night, probably, Thiago Santos against Steve Bosse. What did you think about that? An amazing finish, clearly, and what do you think about Santos' potential?
I definitely predicted Santos to win the fight, but definitely not in that fashion. Bosse hasn't fought in, I think, 2 years, or maybe a little bit over 2 years. So I was definitely having concerns about his chin being able to take a big shot very early in the fight because he hasn't been in competition for 2 years. The kick was amazing, landed right on the spot. And I'm thinking Santos should be in a showdown with Elias Theodorou next.
Ooh, now see, that's a fight that I would favor Elias in probably quite a bit. I think that Elias has probably stepped up in profile and name a little bit more than Santos, especially in the Canadian market. I think that he has, a good little fan base budgeting, so I don't think that's a fight he'd take. But still, it would be a decent matchup, I think, in skill set.
If you take a look at the opponents Elias has beaten, he's only beaten Bruno Santos and Roger Narvaez, who are low-level fighters. Santos is training at ATT now, constantly getting better. If not Santos, he could fight Santos' teammate, Shoeface, as I call him. They just beat Eddie Gordon tonight.
Shoeface had a win and probably probably the most boring fight of the main card. There was not the most boring fight of the night at all, but it was definitely the most boring fight of the main card. Makashvili in that one was really kind of a stinker, but there was parts that were good. Poor Eddie Chuck Gordon, done in the UFC?
Yeah, it's time to go, man. He hasn't really showed anything, in his UFC career. He's just getting worse and worse, in my opinion. It's kind of sad saying that about a Sarah Longo guy, but he's just not making any improvements. It's kind of sad because that whole Tough 19 season has been horrendous in the UFC. Diego Lee, Chuck Gordon, Pat Walsh, Matt Van Buren, Cathal. Even though Cathal's 5-0, I mean, it's not a pretty.
That's the worst 5-0 that a fighter's been ever. Kyle Pendred is a favorite of every MMA bettor in the world because you could just bet him to win a decision and he'll do it even when he loses it for you. You don't even have to really watch the fight. You can just cash the ticket. I'm with you. Eddie Gordon, it seems like the run's done. I think what you have with Eddie Gordon is a clear case of someone who's probably a beast in the gym and just can't really put it together on fight night. Competition out here is fierce, man. It's the UFC. Sure. Even a guy, Carlos Jr. first time making or maybe he's made it before in his career, but first time I think of the UFC making that big cut to 85, and just a big dude who's not going to succumb to Gordon's wrestling game.
Okay. I mean, you got to understand. Shoeface was training with King Mo for this fight, training with some of the best wrestlers in the world at the ATT. There's just nothing physically that Gordon could have bought him possibly to win the fight. Gordon has cardio issues. He breaks mentally very not easily, but he will break.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad because he's one of Weidman's main training partners, and you would expect better out of him, but it's just not there. He just does not have it.
Yeah, he's a guy who can't seem to really put it together in the moments, and Ray Longo is in his corner, and probably one of the more entertaining and knowledgeable guys in the game, and you saw him kind of almost get upset. We didn't hear like the trademark yelling and screaming that we do from a Sarah Longo corner. Because Eddie really just didn't have it in him. Just really didn't have what it took. Let's zoom out a little bit for a second and talk overall on the card. What do you grade this card at? A to F. What did the whole Fox Sports 2 and Fox Sports 1 card do for you tonight?
I'll give it a solid C plus. C plus to a B minus, either one. There was some boring moments, and there was some exciting moments. The Hakron Diaz Makashvili fight to kick off the main card was a stinker. I actually almost fell asleep during that fight. Hakron didn't do anything on top. I actually scored the fight for Makashvili, to be honest.
I scored the fight for Makashvili as well, and I can relate to you as an East Coaster. 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
I've been drinking liquor sometimes before these things start off too. I get sleepy. My old man status kicks in when we have a lay of prayer like that. There's a lot of reversal in position, I guess, in the fight, or was there even really? The details are becoming fuzzy. It was just a real lackluster snoozer, man.
Hakron didn't do anything on top. They're both wrestlers by trade. It wasn't a good matchup to begin with. That's exactly what I expected, but not to that extent. Hakron, I hope they feed him to Brian Ortega next, so Ortega can sub him off his back. That would be very entertaining.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Hakron Diaz, this was a spot kind of for him to have a showcase. You had a late, last-minute opponent, new to the UFC. You're on a beast streak. People are talking how great you are, and you're the talk of your camp. This is really a showcase fight for you, and you didn't show up at all. So you got the W, and you survived for another day. But another fighter who should probably take some time off, sharpen his tools, and get back in here when you have some new wrinkles into your game, because you're really just not sustainable in the UFC with the talent set of that, or that you displayed tonight. There's a clear movement in the UFC now that they want people who are going to stand up, or if you're a takedown artist, you have to mix in a very heavy attack game and get it ground and pound going right away. They don't want stallers. So they're going to find an excuse for you once you lose 2 fights, and they'll put you in a matchup to lose to.
For sure. If you're going to be a wrestler, be exciting with it. Be like a Khabib Nurmagomedov. Be like, throw a suplex in there. Don't ground and pound. You got to be active on top. He wasn't doing anything on top. He was just laying in guard. Makashvili was at least attempting to hit a couple of nice, downs. A very weird one that was actually pretty exciting towards the end of the third round. At least he was trying. At least he hit a takedown, which surprised me, which was actually very entertaining.
No, I really think that I scored the second and third, I believe, for Levan Makashvili. I don't know how you don't score that third round for him, and I really feel like you scored that second round for him. The third round was basically them taking turns, pressing each other against the cage, searching for the takedown. The only person who actually ended up getting the takedown with a minute 20 some odd left, I think, was Levan. And to me, that's how you score that fight. Boring ass fight. Check the guy who got the takedown on. They wanted to have a wrestling match. They had a wrestling match. Boom. We move on.
Exactly. I scored the second round for Makashvili as well. Even though he did get taken down at the end, I thought he got a little bit better the exchanges on the feet and landed a lot more leg kicks. And like I said, Hakron did not do a thing on top. He was throwing fake left hooks that were not landing. and I did not really give him points for that take. I gave him points for the takedown, but it was not enough to win the round.
Yeah, clearly not enough follow-up from him, and clearly not a fight that I want to talk about anymore either, because it was just so boring and awful. Oh, let's just forget about it and forget about most of the prelims, too. All right, MMA Genius, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for coming on. You kind of had a nice witness protection program look for the entire, now no one will really know the identity of the MMA Genius. You kept your anonymity alive. Anything else you want to hit us up with before we wrap this up, man?
Oh yeah, man. Just follow me on Twitter at MMA Genius 05, and we'll definitely work on this lighting issue for the next time.
We'll see your whole face and everything. Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate the time that you take to come on and chat with everyone about the fights.
Thank you, man. Looking forward to next time.
All right, man. Everybody, that was the MMA Genius. You could find him on as a head writer on the Sports Matrix. Follow him on Twitter on @MMAGenius05. That's @MMAGenius05. The MMA Genius. Kind of going a little Cold War spy on us there for a bit. Just the final segment of the show, a segment that I kind of have close to my heart, is the oddities and weird shit that happens. This is a part where I'll just randomly spit through my notes of the fight of just bizarre little instances and curiosities that I thought came up this card. First off, I think you can view the entire fight night, UFC Fight Night 70 on Fox Sports 1 as one giant commercial for UFC 189. They did a fantastic job getting Conor McGregor in front of everyone's face. And people have been complaining about having Conor in front and not so much, respecting the champion. But with Jose Aldo's rib injury, I think it's really smart of the UFC, to get the Conor McGregor interview, have Conor McGregor on the Game of War commercials, have the Conor-centric commercials, and the Talk Is Over commercial. I thought was fairly successful as well. Because we got to appeal to the Conor haters who are going to buy the pay-per-view as well. But the entire Fight Night, UFC Fight Night 70 could be considered a great commercial for UFC 189. Literally the crappiest prelims we've seen since I started this show. One good fight and 3 desperately boring fights. These are fights that were not UFC caliber. I always distinguish between the two, and I try to make an honest assessment. Sometimes the prelims are chock full of talent. Sometimes there are people whose talent I don't know, and it shines. Sometimes the matchups are just really good, so we get fireworks. This didn't have that. This was not worth anyone's time. And Joe Silva, you can pay me for those 2 hours any day. I'll send you the address. You could just ship the check. This is the last card before Reebok, so. Dynamic Fastener, Bad Boy, Hayabusa, all of our great MMA brands. We will miss you. Torque, bye-bye. It was great knowing you. Hello, the Reebok era, and the corporate takeover shall begin. I'm definitely not looking forward to Monster Energy. That's my big pet peeve. Reebok, you're cool with me with your fancy triangle Illuminati symbol. I see what you're doing. But Monster Energy, there couldn't be anything fucking worse. Goddamn terrible energy drink. Energy drinks in general are fucking awful. Monster Energy is the worst of the worst. It is the poor man's energy drink, and that's saying something. Big night for Brazil tonight, and Brazilian fighters who fight in Florida. We saw Bigfoot Silva make an appearance on it. Gleison Tibau with the greatest video cameo. I never thought I'd love Gleison Tibau more than I did in that moment. Sure as hell not fun watching that guy fight, but sometimes he's really great on camera. A lot of Brazilians, up-and-comers who had a spotlight or an opportunity in the spotlight to shine with a really favorable matchup, did not live up to their showcase. Thiago Santos definitely lived up to his showcase and put a highlight reel on him. One real quick note, and I saw this in some areas of Twitter. Heidi Antral, Poor fucking Heidi Androl. Can everyone on UFC on MMA Twitter give this girl a fucking break? She's not an MMA person, and she does these really. I think she does a great job reading these stupid teleprompter stories that she clearly doesn't write. Um, but let's cut the girl some fucking slack. She's just a presenter. She's a smiling, cute face who speaks well on camera. It's not easy to speak well on camera. I know I run a web show that gets watched by 300 people at most, and like 5 of them live. If I had to speak on live television, I would instantly have diarrhea, and everyone would watch me defecate myself. It would probably be on Fox Sports too, so only like 500 people would see it. But still, it would be embarrassing. Cut Heidi Androl some fucking slack. Girls getting paid telling stupid-ass stories written by dumb producers. Give her a fucking break. And not only that, we only ever call her in when there's a flash KO and we got 10 minutes to kill. It's either watching Conor McGregor commercials or Heidi Androl. Those are your fucking options, people. That's all we got for you. Heidi Androl over Conor McGregor commercials for the 80th time, all day, every day. Thank you, Heidi Androl. I salute you as an American. You're the best. Don't be rude to people on Twitter. It's a hard job. Kenny Florian is becoming Joe Rogan-esque, calling submissions. That is the truth. As Kenny Florian will sit in that chair, we'll slowly watch his beautiful hair bald. He'll pack on, roughly 70 to 80-pound muscles, and he'll warp into the Dana White Joe Rogan hybrid that has become the Joe Rogan we now know. Conor McGregor interview. I thought that Conor was great in his interview. It was a very fun little spot. I like Conor McGregor serious before a fight. I don't like the stupid showman WWE shit. I like when he has that real fucking serious tone and he starts talking real shit. That's when I believe him. That's when he's authentic. And I think that stuff, for me at least, sells the fight way better than any of the antics. But clearly I'm not. Most people, and the antics are, should continue because we need some goddamn money in this sport to keep it fucking going, guys. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we need these fucking WWE idiots. We need them coming into this UFC and watching the big shows. We need their money. Otherwise, we can't pay fighters big money, and then they can't have 8-week training camps and can't be professional full-time fighters and make these giant camps that surround and just dedicate themselves to high-level MMA. We don't get good stuff unless we get a bunch of fucking morons to buy this product. So we need dumb greasy bikers buying a live ticket. We need drunken frat brothers, buying a whole row in the first deck, in Hollywood, Florida. We need these dumb broke-ass shows at a Hard Rock Cafe in an Indian casino in Florida. This is what MMA needs to survive. We just need this money. Let's not poo-poo these fans who want to just come in. You want to be a dumb, drunk idiot and scream stuff? Yes. Do you got dollars? Give them to us. We need them. It can't just be cool, hardcore fans who know all these intricacies and know all the fighters and know technique. It can't just be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu nerds. There's not enough of us. There's not enough dollars to make this like a real vibrant sport. So we need fucking morons, people. Don't hate on the morons. Welcome the morons. We could go on shows like this and talk about how dumb they are. Yoel Romero went for a Showtime kick in the second round, and for that he was always my favorite fighter. Being the Soldier of God as your nickname puts you pretty high on my favorite fighter lists. Going for the Showtime kick just makes him so great. Jesus Christ. Not gay Jesus rant. He said, everyone forgot who the man is. Jesus Christ is the man. Not gay Jesus. Gay Jesus gets no love from Yoel Romero. The Soldier of God himself ain't down with gay Jesus. Gay Jesus is one of my favorite Jesuses. My other favorite Jesus is the one that's lead singer of Leonard Skinner and has a wild metal mix. A little bit of John C. Reilly for you. Star-making performance for Yoel Romero. Lorenz Larkin makes a debut in the UFC at 170 and is a beast. Apparently, the beaches in Florida are very nice, and Lorenz Larkin has some of the worst hair in all of MMA. That about sums it up for tonight. I give my Knockout of the Night award to Thiagos Matheus Santos, of course. I give my other Knockout of the Night award to Lorenz Larkin for his showcase. Oh no, I'm sorry. I give it to Yoel Romero just because stopping a legend is such a unique moment in time and really a career building performance for the soldier of God. The fight of the night I give no one because fuck that. There was no fight of the night. There was no great back and forth competition. And so I give two more highlight bonuses. We'll give one to Tony Sims and one to Lorenz Larkin. Thank you all for joining me on the fourth episode of Before the Bald Man Speaks. Next episode, we have huge guests lined up, and I hope it comes through, so I'm not going to tell you who it is, just in case, I don't want to feel like an asshole if it falls apart. But UFC 189 is going to be massive. The show is going to be massive for it, and thank you all for tuning in live. My people who tuned in live, you're fantastic. We'll check to see if there's any questions in the question phase. None of you had questions, which is fantastic. Thanks for viewing and not writing in anything. If you guys do want to, feel free to ask anything you want in the question and answer section. You do have to be in the Google Hangout, not the YouTube, to access the Q&A section. But go ahead and do that. As always, give me a follow. I'm on Twitter at The Clown Kid. As always, I'm at The Clown Kid. Hit me up if you like the show. If there's anything fucked up about the show, please let me know. I love, hearing people's input and hearing what's working and what's not. So thank you guys, as always, for watching. Please, if you like this shit, share it with your friends. Share it on social media. I always appreciate, YouTube. Retweets and favorites and Facebook posts and all that stuff. So please hook it up, and thank you all for supporting me, man, and everybody have a good night. Take it easy. Peace. Bye.